The hour's 3 o'clock. It's Tuesday, It is Tuesday, March 5th, and we will call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. It's our first time in this room, so cut us a tiny bit of slack for the microphones and everything else. We'll start out by approving the order of agenda. As far as I know, item 1 and 2 will be heard as normal. Item 3A and B, which is Timber Creek 9th edition, has been continued to April 2nd. 4A and B, 5 and 6 will all be heard as well. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
To approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Approved. Minutes from our last meeting, February 5th, were included in the packet. Any corrections, additions, discussion? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
To approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. It's approved. Our brown bag, we will have it's a little different this month. We're going to have a joint brown bag with Planning Commission and the Community Development Commission as well, and that will be held on Tuesday. Yep, Tuesday the 26th at 8 a.m. Again, a little switch up here, 8 a.m., and it will be held at City Hall here. So see you then.
And maybe, Chair,
Yeah.
if I can real quick, the topic is going to be the core neighborhood plan. So similar to the discussion on the land development code, we'll have a joint discussion with the core neighborhood plan.
Yeah, and as they both fall under planning, staff would be a good opportunity for us to get to know who else is on that commission. I would like to welcome the NDSU architecture students sitting right over there. Welcome to the classroom here. And before we get started, Mark Williams will give us a little rundown of the room as we are new to it.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I want to welcome you to our new Commission chambers, and it's nice to see that everyone is spread out nice and not scrunched like the last one. I'm going to date myself here a little bit and state this is the third Commission chambers I have actually actively participated in. And when I first started years ago, I created a little faux pas. They sat me next to Mark Bittner, and I was brand spanking new. And I remember someone asking this really complex question of, I don't even know what it was about, but they said, well, what do you think, Mark? And I'm like, and I remember I started answering the question. I had no clue. I was brand new. And then Mark started speaking up. I'm like, oh, that was bad. So hopefully there'll be a lot less names and a lot more area to prevent any accidents like that in the future here. I just kind of want to point out sort of some of how the room was designed. Staff will be doing presentations from this podium. The public will be doing presentations from that podium. We have a whole bunch of audio, video, as well as options available to be able to present over the TV system. Each place has a computer that has USB hookups, so anybody can present anything digitally that they need to present. I've had the opportunity to be able to utilize timers to be able to kind of keep people on track. In addition, if there's any paper copies that need to be shown, there's a spot up there on your table that you can put that on, and there's a camera above, as well as on the side of each of these podiums. So that being said, is there any questions as far as the operations of how this room works?
This isn't so much operational, but when I was here for the City Commission meeting, they did mention the colors on these panels change based on things going on in the community. I was just curious if the green is for our great NDSU Bison team, or did I just make that up? Maybe it is.
Maybe that, and for spring. It's supposed to start warming
spring.
up.
Sorry, yes, probably for spring. Okay.
All right,
Any
thank
questions? You. Thank you. With that, we will open up the public hearing. We'll start with item number 1, NSC Edition. Megan will take us through this one. Just a note, Mike McGelkey is recusing himself from this vote.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Planning Commissioners. Item 1, NSC Edition, is an application from the Fargo Park District for an institutional master plan at the Northside Softball Complex. The property is located at Lot 1, Block 1, NSC Edition, and 6101 45th Street North. Dave Leaker and Dave Beets from the Fargo Park District are present if you would have any questions. So the Fargo Park District is seeking approval of the institutional master plan to establish development entitlements for planned improvements for the Northside Softball Complex. The Planning Commission has reviewed a handful of institutional master plans over the last several years, with the most recent one being the water treatment plant that was reviewed by the Planning Commission last August. The applicant is seeking approval for the purpose of satisfying the project review requirements for development within the PI, Public and Institutional Zoning District. Project review of the development within the PI zoning district can be accommodated in one of two ways: site plan review, which is typical for most types of construction, and the institutional master plan, where as long as the project is consistent with the plan, there is no site plan review. Institutional master plans are specific to the PI zoning district and are intended to accommodate larger public and semi-public institutions that have unique development needs when compared to typical building construction. These large institutions are not typically completed at the time of original construction, but undergo continuous incremental development and change over time. The institutional master plan is intended to better accommodate these unique development characteristics of institutions, and as such, the Fargo Park District is seeking approval of an institutional master plan to accommodate land development code review of the plans for the Northside Softball Complex over several phases of construction. Attached to your staff report is the institutional master plan narrative and plans associated with it. A little bit of history on this site. As you may be familiar with, there was recent entitlement applications for a subdivision plat, zoning change, and growth plan amendment, which were reviewed by the Planning Commission on September 4th of 2018 and approved by the City Commission on February 11th of this year. There are two provisions of the Land Development Code which will be accommodated through this plan in a unique way. First, this institutional master plan proposes to pave existing gravel parking lots at the time of the adjacent roadways, which are currently gravel, at the time they are reconstructed into an urban section. And two, the plan proposes to meet open space plant units in part by planting native grasses instead of from a container, which is typical and how it's regulated in our Land Development Code. Perennials, such as native grasses, are counted as one plant unit for a number 2 container and require 8 square feet of open space. The institutional master plan proposes to count 8 square feet of planted grass as one plant unit. The plan notes that if the native grass areas are not implemented after phase 4 is complete, the equivalent or the remainder of required plant units will be installed as trees. As I mentioned, Dave Leaker and Dave Beets are here if you have any questions of specifics of the institutional master plan. Overall, staff finds that all criteria are met and is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for Megan at this time? Thank you, Megan. Does either Dave wish to speak on this item?
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Is it working? Good afternoon.
There
There
we
you go.
go.
Good afternoon, commissioners. No, I think Megan summed it up nicely, and it's a great project for us. We've had some national tournaments out here, and things are progressing very well.
Right. Commissioners, any questions? Okay, thank you. At
Thank
this
you.
time, we'd like to open it up for public hearing. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Commissioners, any questions, discussion? Are we ready to act?
Move to approve with the motion outlined in the staff report.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz. Aye. Gunkelman,
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion's carried. Thank you. On to item number 2, Prairie Farm Second Edition. And Aaron Nelson will walk us through this one.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Item number 2 is titled Prairie Farm Second Edition. This is a request for a minor subdivision. This application is being represented by Brunson Mathiasen, who is here to answer any questions you may have on behalf of the ownership. The subject property is located at 6059, 5069, and 6087 Prairie Grove Court South, which is approximately right between I-29 and 25th Street, just a few blocks north of 64th Avenue South. The purpose of this minor subdivision is to take 3 existing lots and replat it into, to create 2 lots. So essentially losing 1 lot, creating 2 slightly larger lots out of those existing 3. The plat is pretty straightforward. I would note one thing, however. There is an existing stormwater inlet and pipe located in between the easternmost 2 existing lots. And so as a result of this replat, that interior lot line between those 2 lots will essentially go away, leaving that pipe kind of internal to the proposed lot 2. And so the pipe would need, and the inlet would need to be relocated. And so the applicant is working with our engineering department as well as adjacent property owner to the south to relocate that infrastructure. The plat wouldn't move forward to City Commission until the details of that are worked out with an agreement finalized through our engineering department. Other than that, staff finds the proposed subdivision is consistent with required growth plan, all applicable LDC requirements, and staff is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Thanks, Aaron. Commissioners, any questions for Aaron? Okay, thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak on this? Okay, Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we'll open this up for public comment. Any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Commissioners, we ready to act? Any questions or discussion?
Madam Chair, I would move to approve as presented.
Okay, is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion's carried. Right, on to items 4A and B, Madelines Meadows Second Edition. And this is presented by Donald Kress.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress of the Department of Planning and Development. Item 4A and 4B is the Madelines Meadows Second Edition Plat and Zone Change. You all may recall Madelines Meadows from about mid-year last year. We're out here on 25th Street South and 73rd, 70th. This area here was the Madelines Meadows First Edition. This is County Drain 53 out here. At the time of Madelines Meadows First Edition, only the east end was platted into lots, but this large lot here in the middle, Lot 9, Block 3, was left zoned agricultural and is intended for future development, basically a phase 2, which the applicant is now coming forward with today. And there's the visual. This portion here was annexed as part of that overall project. This part, which is not yet developed, remains outside the city limits. Proposed plat is shown here, 5 blocks with connecting streets. This street already exists. That was part of the original plat. These are all connected here. These are all for detached single-family housing. A couple of different lot sizes there is summarized in your packet. The zoning is proposed to be SR4 here, which is about pretty standard zoning in this area, and then SR5 on Block 2, slightly smaller lots, slightly smaller widths, but still a single-family zone. And again, the detached housing is proposed for all these. If you'll go back and note, there's a private alley here in Block 2, and that will be maintained by the homeowners association. It is not a lot to be owned by the homeowners association. It's just will be maintained by them as part of the covenants that apply to this. Just to go back to Madelines Meadows, as you may recall, there was a lot of stuff happening on the west end of Madelines Meadows. So this part here is where we're at now. This is the second edition. On the west end, there's also, that fits into the, you might say, the notch here, is the Park District property with a detention basin. There's another area for future development here on the west side of the street, and then there are two areas here for the City of Fargo and the Southeast Cass Water Resources District for a levee and future expansion of Drain 53. So there is still one more possible piece of development left to be done on that. The staff's recommendation is stated on your screen and written in your staff report. Mr. John Eunice is here as the project representative, and he may wish to address the commission. That concludes staff's presentation, commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Commissioners, any questions for Donald?
I have just one question, Donald.
Yes,
Is 73rd Avenue South, is that already platted? Because it appears it isn't part of this plat, correct?
Yes, it was part of Madelines Meadows 1.
Part of number
Yes.
1?
Yes, sir.
All the way to the west?
Yeah, because it hooks around like this. If you see that.
Okay, so it has been platted, though?
Yes, sir. Mr. Eunice, do you have any comment on that? That is in there, correct? No, no, that one with the X.
This one?
There you go.
Yeah, that was platted with Madelines Meadows first in order to get the storm sewer pipe all the way over to the actual detention pond.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Donald. John, do you wish to speak on this?
You guys have any questions?
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for John? Okay, thank you. We'll open this up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, any discussion? Are we ready to act? Mike?
Madam Chair, I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
Okay, is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Stofferin,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion is carried. Thank you. On to item number 5, Lenthies. I don't know how to say that, I guess. Lenthies first edition, am I right? Want to correct me on that, Donald?
I believe so, ma'am. I believe
Okay.
that's correct. So this item, again, a minor plat here that takes some, go to the aerial photo here, an area along Main Avenue here, just as some reference points, is the Petro and Mango's restaurant is right in here, and 27th Avenue is in here. And so the property owner here, these are a number of lots here that were zoned or platted back in the 1940s. That's what Tigan's Edition is. And then this piece back here was recently owned by the railroad, and Mr. Lenthy, who owns these properties, has bought this property and wishes to replat this whole area here, including this little piece over here, into 3 lots for his convenience. We are under the understanding that the existing development is all going to stay there. There's not going to be tear down and rebuild anything, but this is for Mr. Lenthy's business purposes. So here we have 3 lots, one here, and then this one off here. All the existing accesses, you don't really see it because of the black line here, but all the existing accesses off Main Avenue will remain. And then this piece here is actually owned by the North Dakota Department of Transportation. It has never been technically dedicated as right-of-way, but it is effectively really a driveway to this area, because it's hard to turn around on Main Avenue because of the configuration of the access points. And so that's what this large cross-hatched area is here. This is an easement that crosses all the properties to allow vehicles to come in from the east here and get all the way across the properties on an easement with no property questions there. Again, the zoning is general commercial, GC. There is no change in the zoning. The existing businesses, we imagine, will all remain there. Mr. Jim Schliemann of Houston Engineering is representing the project here today. He managed to address the commission. Otherwise, staff's recommendation is shown on the screen and stated in your staff report. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Donald. Commissioners, any questions for Donald? Okay, thank you, Donald. Does the applicant wish to speak on this? Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Jim? Okay, seeing none, we'll open up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Okay, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, any questions, discussion, motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the findings as presented in our packet.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
There's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Sobolik,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, motion is carried. Thank you, Donald. On to item number 6, Case Peak and Hall Edition, and Megan has this one for us.
Case Peak and Hall Edition. The entitlement requested is for a zoning change from SR3, single dwelling residential, to MR2, multi-dwelling residential. The property is located on Lot 9, Block 5, Case Peak and Hall Edition, which is address of 1527 Fifth Avenue South. Robert Gertzen with Lutheran Social Services is here if you have any questions. The application is for a zoning change, as noted, from SR3 single dwelling to MR2 multi-dwelling. The property is adjacent to Luther Hall, which is in pink right next door, which is also owned by Lutheran Social Services, which is a community service and group living use. LSS has owned both of these properties, or the subject property, since the late 1990s. There was a house on the property which was used as offices and was demolished last fall. Staff is not aware of any expansion of the facility other than a small accessory structure, and the proposed zone change would essentially clean up the property and have one zoning district for their facility. LSS is also in the process of combining the 2 tax parcels into one. Staff has received 1 call and 2 emails with no noted concern after explanation of the application. And overall, staff finds all criteria are met and are recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for Megan? No? Okay. Does the applicant wish to speak? Okay. Okay. Any questions for the applicant, commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we'll open up for public comment. Are there any members of the audience that wish to speak in favor of or in opposition to the application? Yes, I'll have you come up to the podium.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Randy Engelstad. I live across the street from the property, and I got notice, and I did call Megan, and she did explain the plan was to build just an accessory structure for storing lawn equipment or snow removal equipment or whatever. But I'm curious as to, could that still be built under the existing zoning? And why have the zoning change, once it gets changed, 3, 4, how many more properties down the block are gonna get purchased and rezoned, and all of a sudden there's 16 or 32 unit apartment building going up? That's my main concern. So my main question was, can whatever they're planning on doing be built under the existing zoning that's there today? And why change the zoning just to build a accessory structure? So.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yep.
The Jefferson Neighborhood Association met with the owner, Lutheran Social Services, and we were assured that this was just something that should have been taken care of some time ago when the property was purchased, I think in the 90s, is that right? And it was just something that didn't come up until now when the house had fallen into disrepair and was demolished. It's outside of the historic overlay, and apparently what is going to happen is they're just going to have a garage there where they'll be able to keep some of their equipment, and also they'll have a green space that'll be available to the residents, the children that live there. And that also they're planting a hedge so that it'll be continuous with the existing property. So nothing will appear to have changed there other than it probably will be a better view. As far as I can tell, there is no plans to extend further into the neighborhood. Is that right? Could you speak to that?
Let's finish up with public comment, and then we can
okay.
fill us in. Any other members of the audience wish to speak on this item? Okay, we'll close public comment at this time. Commissioners, do you want to discuss, or Megan, would you like to respond at all to the question?
So accessory structures are primarily found on, within the same zoning district and on the same property. And so as Don was saying, Commissioner Morgan was saying, it's my understanding this is essentially a cleanup, and Lutheran Social Services has owned the property since the 90s. And so in order to have that accessory structure, which isn't permitted on its own, and an accessory structure like a garage is not permitted in a single dwelling zoning district kind of on its own, but it's really to kind of clean up their property and also allow them to build that accessory structure. Does that answer?
Thank you. Sure. Yeah. Commissioners, any other questions or discussion? If not, I'd entertain a motion. Are we ready to act? Yep.
Move to approve the motion in the packet.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Holtz.
Aye.
Sobolik.
Aye.
McGilkey.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Stoffren.
Aye.
Tassa.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye, the motion is carried. That is the end of our public hearing items. At this time, we will hear from Mark Williams regarding the RFP for the Land Development Code.
Thank you. I'm kind of starting to feel I'm at the point now where you guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about this. However, we are extremely excited to have the opportunity to be able to look at our Land Development Code. Over the last many years, people have identified issues and brought to our attention items within the Land Development Code that may or may not be consistent with what the community wants as far as growth within the city of Fargo. That's posed a couple challenges as far as how do we go about looking at those issues and how do we go about fixing them if there are identifiable issues. Discussion took place last year with the thought of how do we challenge ourselves to tackle this as a project. And one of the decisions that was made was to request a little bit more money in our planning services account to be able to hire a consultant to help us identify what issues are going on with the code, what are the national trends, and maybe some suggestions of where we might want to go in the future. We put our heads together since the beginning of the year, and fortunately we were awarded extra money within our planning services account to be able to follow through with this, and came up with an idea of a two-phased approach. And the first phase would be hiring a consultant to look at our code, make some suggestions of what's going on with our code, and then from there maybe put together a timeline or another strategy of what to do with our code. As of today, I don't know if everyone can agree if it needs some minor changes or a complete overhaul. And this first phase would help us identify that. We would come back with phase two, and phase two would be whatever would be proposed and whatever would be approved by the Planning Commission and City Commission as far as what to do with the code in the future. I've been referring to it as phase one for a while. Just last week, I think we finally labeled it as the LDC diagnostic study. So we kind of have something that we can refer to now. We talked to the Planning Commission February 5th, kind of entertaining this idea and gathering up some questions and some concerns. And we also presented this at the February 20th Planning Commission brown bag meeting. The timeline is hopefully we can have an RFP out sometime April, May-ish, and we feel it's going to take about a year to be able to find a consultant and then have the consultant do the work to be able to go through the code. And so hopefully somewhere around February 2020, we would have some recommendations to be able to move forward with what direction we want to go. That being said, I've worked with this document for many, many years. I'm extremely excited about doing this as a process. I believe that going through this process is going to give us the confidence in our code in the future to be able to accommodate good development and discourage bad development, and we're just all around excited. We're recommending approval to be able to go ahead with publishing an RFP and starting this process. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions? Yep, Mike.
Mark, what kind of money are you looking at spending to do this study?
I don't think we quite have an answer to that yet. I think once we put out our RFP and see what type of consultants actually respond to our request, I think we'll have a better idea. We do understand that it's going to take a fairly long time to be able to go through with this.
You said that there's been additional funds put in the budget for it. How much has been allocated?
So based on the 2019 request for our 2019 budget, we requested that our planning services account get increased to $330,000. From that money, we also put together a timeline to be able to utilize that money year after year to be able to update other plans like the Go 2030 plan, the Downtown in Focus plan. We probably will use that money in our timeline to completely reconstruct the 2007 growth plan, to do major modifications of our land development code, as well as there's a couple other small miscellaneous plans out there that need some updating. It's pretty good practice to be able to have, if those plans get any older than 5 years, they get to be pretty obsolete and they get to be really challenging to update. That usually requires a reconstruction of the plan altogether. So the goal is to be able to get all of these plans in a 5-year cycle so we can keep maintaining them and keep creating a direction for the city to follow in the future.
Well, you said that that this fund was increased. So how much was it increased?
It was around the $140,000 range.
It was increased by 140,000, or was 140 the last budget?
The last budget.
Okay, thank you.
Nicole?
Maybe Commissioner McGilkey, I think our total budget we have to work with for consulting is about $300,000. It was increased by about $100,000, so from 200 to 300 in the last, from 2018 to 2019. I'm guessing this first phase of study is going to be in the neighborhood of 150,000. But there's firms across the country that just specialize in code development, and so we're not sure if this RFP will attract those level of specializations.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other? Mm-hmm.
So Mark, in the process, they come in and look at our current code and the changes that we've made over the years. Where do we get to public? I mean, so they come back with a recommendation and then we come up with a game plan on how to move forward, and then subcommittees and whatever with the public. And can you explain that a little bit?
I would say that phase 2 is going to be more in depth than phase 1, but phase 1 will also include some consensus building amongst the stakeholders within the community to be able to help identify what issues are going on with the existing code, to be able to come up with some sort of recommendations. And some of those stakeholders are going to be the developers, the neighborhoods, the business owners, the engineering firms, the architecture firms.
Commissioners, other questions? Thank you, Mark. Anything else to add? If not, the motion is in front of us. I'd entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the staff's request to draft and publish a request for a proposal for the development codes, diagnostic study, and to otherwise initiate this project.
Is there a second on this motion?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Do you want a roll call vote on this? Just a voice vote? Does it matter? Yeah, okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thanks. We do have one more item on our list. It's renewal plans and the role of Planning Commission presented by Jim Gilmore.
Is there a handout for this? Is there a handout for this? Is there a handout for them?
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the renewal plans that you've been reviewing in the past. I know you looked at one or several a few months ago, and we didn't have the hard copies out in the packet, and I think it was a little confusing what the role of the Planning Commission was in the review of these renewal plans. These renewal plans or development plans, they're plans for redevelopment of the city, often in clearing blocks or getting new development in vacant land that's in the interior of the city. So the renewal plans, they consist of a plan of what we want to do in the future. It explains what's there and really lays out a plan for, within a specific couple block area often, what that renewal area should look like in the future. Some examples of renewal plans that we've done recently in the community had been the Roberts Commons parking garage and associated development. There's a renewal district there that I believe was created in 2015. There were 3 surface parking lots there, and now you see a new parking garage wrapped with the private building, another private building to the north, and there's plan for another private building that would be going in behind the black building. So, that's an example of renewal plan that's relatively large. Another renewal plan we had was out on the corner of I-29 and Main Avenue. There's a Butler Business Park there. It's kind of two large industrial or commercial buildings where there had previously been primarily vacant land and some relatively low value buildings. We've also had some small renewal plans. For instance, at 701 10th Street North, I think there's an apartment building there, about 15 units, where several old homes were removed and they were redeveloped into an apartment building. And so they can be quite large, or they could be a relatively small, 20-unit apartment building. We've just adopted a new tax increment financing policy that lays out the process for how we're going to do renewal plans in the future. And there's really 2 types. There's city-led plans and really more developer-requested plans. So an example of the city-led plan was those 2, the parking garage on Roberts, where the city wanted some more parking there. We own the lot. We went out with an RFP and we negotiated with the landowners to do a mixed-use development there. Within that renewal plan, there were a series of things that the city paid for. In this case, it was the parking garage. In the case of assisting private developers, some things that cities can assist with would be the cost of demolition, the cost of some land acquisition, or the cost to put in public facilities to a site where those public facilities were inadequate. So you got these developer-led requests and the city-led requests. In the process, they both start at the City Commission. So the City Commission would authorize the Planning Department and other city staff to put together a renewal plan. One thing that's being considered now is whether we should have a renewal plan along the river to help pay for a plaza or public improvements along the river outside of City Hall. So the city might actually lead that, create a certain size district. How the renewal plans work is that you can often use tax increment financing so that you create a renewal area, the new development that comes in, that new development will pay property taxes, and that property taxes go into a urban renewal or a TIF fund that can be used to make public improvements. So that's where the city leads and says, we want this area to be renewed, we're going to create a district, we're going to do these things, and we're going to hopefully pay for it with TIF dollars. It's not only TIF dollars, though sometimes you can also use just general fund money, but it's where the city is putting out public money to make improvements with the idea that that will lead to more and better development in the future. The other type that we often see is developer requested renewal plans. A project that you're quite familiar with is the Newman Roars block on 12th Avenue and University. They have indicated at the City Commission that they may make a request for tax increment financing assistance for that redevelopment. And so things that would be eligible would be, some of the costs of the land, if there are new public facilities such as sidewalks, or demolition of the houses on that property. The way the process would work is that they would apply first to the City Commission. The City Commission would look at it and say, yeah, this is an appropriate project that we would like to support, and so go ahead and put together a plan. At that point, the city hires our financial advisor, and we look at their pro forma and really ask the question, do they really need the assistance, or would this happen anyway if we didn't do a thing? And so we look at the financials and try to determine, should this project receive some assistance so that we can get a good project and hopefully a better project. When those renewal plans are developed, they're really going to be reviewed by two groups. One is our tax exempt review committee, and the other is the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's role is this plan consistent with the neighborhood? Is it consistent with the zoning? Is it appropriate for the neighborhood? The tax increment financing or tax exempt committee asks the question, do they need this assistance, and what should we give them and what shouldn't we give them? So you got two different roles here. You're looking at the land use, the quality of the development. They're looking at probably more the financial impact of the development and whether or not it's appropriate to spend the public money on those types of activities. So I expect that over the next year with this new TIF plan, we'll see both of those types of requests. I mentioned the Roars and Newman. I know there are some other people interested in, applying to help, do redevelopment kind of consistent with our Go 2030 plan to get some higher density, higher quality development in town and, clean up some dilapidated properties. The city is also, has a possibility we could do additional renewal plans in the downtown. There are 3 large main renewal plans that we have in place downtown. One is the Roberts Commons, which I mentioned. The second is Block 9, where the tower cranes are. And the third that's in place but has not yet started is what we're referring to as the mercantile development. It's where the Goodyear tire store used to be, if you remember a few years ago, to do another mixed-use development there. Again, the 2 parking garages were city-led. The Block 9 was kind of a combination city developer-led. And if we do something with Roars or another apartment development near NDSU, those are more developer-requested projects. And so we have a new policy in place. I know there's some interest in it. And so I just wanted to talk to you about what your role is, because I think sometimes you may get people comment to you that say, well, they shouldn't get this amount of money, where really the role of the Planning Commission is it compatible with the neighborhood and the zoning? And same thing with the Tax Exempt Committee. their role isn't, is it fit with the zoning? It's more, what's the level of assistance is appropriate, and how badly do we want this project? So just want to go over that and see if you have any questions without having a renewal plan in front of you that may have concern. And we'll certainly get those out to you a little bit more time in advance next time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions? Yep.
Jim, I know that, when we had the one up at the university recently, one of the arguments back to the planning commission about whether or not the compromise that would have been offered by the community was viable or not, and they said, well, we simply can't afford it, we just can't make that work. But that's not our role. If we felt that what was being offered as a compromise seemed to make more sense, the economic portion of it is kind of immaterial according to our role, correct?
I think that's right. Your role is this compatible with the neighborhood development? Is this compatible with your plan? If I know there was another renewal plan up there in the area where, the neighborhood was arguing against it, saying it doesn't fit in, but the property was already zoned MR3, and the plan said there should be multifamily. And so really your role is to decide what's the appropriate land use, and is it compatible, not, do they need higher density to make a profit? It's whether or not that density is appropriate for that particular space.
Question? Yep, commissioners.
Jim, the last one that you brought forward, the Rohr's properties west of, say, 16th Street and south of 12th Avenue, there was not a end game there. That was just for the demolishing of the houses, if I remember correctly. So without knowing what's going to happen, we approved, I take it, funds were made available to demolish the houses, and then there's not a project, if I remember right, actually on track.
Yeah, that was a kind of unique renewal plan in that we identified that the redevelopment was appropriate and that that they may be eligible in the future for the cost of demolition. So we were documenting that it was blighted. We were saying that it should be redeveloped, but we kind of stopped there. We didn't say we were going to give you any money because we don't know yet what they will build there. So in order for them to get any tax increment financing assistance, we would actually have to create a TIF district. So it's kind of we went halfway. We said, this is blighted, this should be redeveloped. We encourage you to do that. Then we stopped. And once they're ready to actually build something and have, then they would be able to apply for money. And then the tax exempt committee will answer the question, do they need the money or don't they, or will this happen anyway?
Can they come back and recoup, like in that case, they were going to tear down those?
Yeah, they're documenting the costs with the hopes that they could be eligible for reimbursement.
To reimburse, okay.
There's no guarantee that they will be.
Okay.
I have a question. In this number 3 here, at the first 405804, it says that rehabilitation or conservation of slum or blighted areas by working with replanning, removing congestion, providing parks, playgrounds, and other public improvements, and by encouraging voluntary rehabilitation, and by compelling repair and rehabilitation of deteriorated or deteriorating structures. So if we were considering that and comparing it to what was just discussed, would there be an effort to push forward to say, okay, there's an opportunity for, rather than demolition and creating this space that may be redeveloped by a developer, that there are incentives for blighted areas or people owning homes in blighted areas to make improvements to their properties? And then if that's not the case with one house or another, that it would be possible to provide parks or playgrounds in those lots. Just the question is, continuing, then the parks and playgrounds would, if that happened to exist in a neighborhood that had been rehabilitated by individual homeowners, is that something that's maintained by the city then, or is that a Parks Department inheritance?
I think this is a pretty flexible type of a workable program you can put together. So you can put together an urban renewal plan that might say we need a park in this neighborhood. It's inadequate. You know, who takes care of it, and all of that would be spelled out in the plan. And implementation of the plan isn't just with you know, tax increment financing dollars. It could be general fund dollars. It could be some HUD dollars. For instance, we already have an urban renewal district on this block that we sit on that the city commission had approved, and they've implemented that plan by selling bonds and building this building, part of an overall strategy to encourage development along the river. And so it doesn't have to be tax increment financing. You can have an urban renewal plan that where you simply use, you know, other public money to implement your plan.
So that redevelopment would be encouraged by the current homeowners then of specific areas that considered to be blighted?
We could have an urban renewal plan that would include that Newman block and perhaps areas outside of it where there's redevelopment on one block and preservation activities on the block next to it. So your plan can have two different strategies in two different areas.
Yeah, that sounds interesting because there were many people that were discouraged that lived around the Newman project that said, well, if those houses are going, mine's going to be next. And so I like that idea of encouragement, of stabilization of the existing neighborhood.
And I think that's, I know what you're trying to get at with that core neighborhood plan is to kind of answer those hard questions, which blocks should be redeveloped and which blocks should be preserved.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question, Jim, and I'm looking at 405806, number 2, and it shows on here that a development or renewal plan, if it's only focused on industrial or commercial property, would not come in front of the Planning Commission. Is that correct?
It's correct. It's not required to. It's been our practice to bring them all to you.
Okay. And the reason I was asking is then below it says that we could provide written recommendations. And so I was curious how we would provide recommendations if we don't get presented the plan.
Again, if the city commission chose not to refer to you, then you wouldn't have that opportunity, but we've always brought them to you. So even when the Butler Business Park was done, I believe that one came to here, even though it was just commercial and industrial property.
Commissioners, other questions?
Thank
Do you
you.
have any other comments? Okay. We appreciate you bringing this forward when there isn't a application for us to look at. It's helpful to get this information. Well, with that, everybody, I think we can all agree this space is a little bit better than the last one. Just kidding, it's fantastic. Like I can spread my arms out and everything. Thank you for coming, students. Appreciate it. You're welcome anytime. We meet monthly. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.